Good evening. I am going to get us started, and I am going to apologize. I'm going to hand it over to Shannon, and then I will step in one moment. Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us as we bring our families receiving special services together to talk about our plans for this fall. We are recording this session so that others can take part. I'll go ahead and advance this slide real quick so that we can talk through the processes. So my name, I just realized I am not showing my video there. There we go. I am Shannon Gilbert. I am the Director of Inclusive Services here with the Anacortes School District. For those of you that were working with Fran McCarthy previously, I have replaced her. I've been in the district for about 15 years now in various roles and supporting the special ed department in many ways for about the past 12 years. We will have some opportunities for Q&A or questions and answers. If you use the Q&A box in the document or in your screen, we will respond to those as we're going through the presentation as much as we can, and any that we aren't able to address during the presentation, we will get back to as we get to the end. And we'll be recording this, as I mentioned, and then we will also make a copy of this Q&A and present it for families for any questions that we weren't able to address. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and Ms. Clifford, Dr. Clifford, myself, and possibly Mr. Harrington will help answer those as we progress, and we will do our best. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Clifford to introduce herself.
Hi, thanks, Shannon. I'm Becky Clifford. I'm the new Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Inclusive Services. And so what that means is we have teaching and learning and student service, special ed, English language learners, student supports under one department to support cohesive support and foster cohesive, inclusive practices across the district. And tonight, I know Shannon will review the purpose, but today we're here to give you a little bit of information about our plans for September 14th and going forward for students with disabilities. We also want to get your input because we're going to be bringing staff in during this week to finalize some components of the plans, and we want to hear from you to find out what your questions, concerns, wonders, and ideas are. So we look forward to this meeting and to working with you and collaborating with you tonight and throughout the year. I'll hand it back over to Shannon. Thanks.
Mr. Harrington, anything you'd like to add before we get going?
Not at this time, but if there's anything specific to middle school, they can reach out to me in that Q&A as well.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you very much. So our purpose tonight is to provide parents with information so that you can be better informed for any students that you have receiving special education services, and also to allow for feedback so that it can better guide our decision making as we move forward. If you have taken part in any of our Q&As over the past few weeks, you have probably seen this information here, which is the state guidance about how we are reopening our schools. And currently with Skagit County, we are still in that high category. So we are being asked to keep things as small as possible. And it's really focusing on students with disabilities and a couple of other categories that we are reintroducing students with first. We are also trying to do all of this with a safe, equitable, and responsive approach. So we have been getting information from community members through community engagement, having various stakeholder committees, and also having a district steering committee so that we have a global approach to this as opposed to just one single idea going around and being floated out there. So our priorities for Continuous Learning 2.0, which is what we are using this fall, are high quality instruction. We are having staff that are focused on both providing instruction to students as well as having engagement with students, and that we can have a consistent experience for families and students. Throughout all of this, we want equitable outcomes as well as to maintain health and safety, which is why we are starting with some small groupings. You may have seen these outlines already, just kind of how we've been progressing through. The fun part about all of this planning in the summer is that there has been various changes made all throughout the process. We have often used terms such as building a plane in flight or trying to create a puzzle during a hurricane. All of these things are happening and we get guidance throughout. So even today we just got new guidance regarding lunches, and last week we had guidance about special education services. So as we are getting this guidance from the state, we are addressing that and incorporating that into our plans. Right now, we're at the point where we are looking forward to September 14th, which is the students' first day back to school, whether it is in a remote setting or a virtual online setting. It is working with them at ASD at home, or in some cases, possibly even being back on site. Our reopening plan consists of 6 steps, and our current step that we are planning for is step 3, which brings in students of high need. This is really students in our life skills classes or students that we were looking at that with their special ed and their IEPs, they could not access learning in the online environment in the spring. So we're bringing them in for a little bit of time during the week to try and help address that particular concern.
And can I add that we hosted a meeting on Friday, 2 sessions on Friday with parents of students that would be identified in that category, to be able to speak with them about those services and have initial conversations about their questions and ideas.
So as many of you are aware, we are working with 2 programs or 2 learning options this fall. And one is ASD Hybrid, which is focusing on bringing students back into school when it is safe to do so based on state and Department of Health guidelines. And our second is ASD at Home, which allows for students to remain at home with support from some ASD staff for their learning this year. The big difference with ASD Hybrid and ASD at Home is that with the ASD Hybrid program, it is taught by district teachers, and it is using consistent and familiar curriculum that the students have been focusing on, and it's, again, a phased-in approach to bringing students back later this year. With the ASD at Home, the parent or guardian is acting as the coach or mentor for the program, and you are getting support from ASD staff. So it's a homeschool program that the district is paying for families that are engaging in that particular option. Health and safety is a big concern across the board for both staff, families, and students. So what we're working with is having health checks prior to a student boarding the bus or entering the building if they're being transported by the family. Masks are being worn as much as possible, and for students who have sensory issues or some other difficulty wearing a mask, we are working with those students and the staff to help provide supports for that student. So a feeding plan or some way of just encouraging them to wear the masks as much as possible. We have cleaning happening throughout the day, especially when transitioning between different activities, and then hand washing when students enter or return to class from having been outside using the restroom, something of that sort. Maybe they had a therapy that they went to and they left the room for. And then also we've got classes being disinfected between groups. And this is part of the reason that we have these 2 days that we're looking at in phases 3, 4, and 5, so that we've got time in between groups or in between cohorts of students to get cleaning and disinfecting done within the buildings. This is a sample schedule for elementary. And I had a question recently about this in terms of the student day starting at 8:30 and not ending until 4. That's actually staff time. Our student days across all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school, are remaining the same. It's what is built into that time that varies. So as you can see here, it's got teacher tasks and student tasks. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday are focusing on a lot of that instructional pieces, whereas Wednesday is some teacher-directed, focusing on planning and supporting some additional students as they need to. Here is a sample of a schedule for the middle school. The Monday schedule on the left side is odd periods, first, third, and fifth. In the middle is even periods, second, fourth, and sixth, which would be a Tuesday type of schedule, which is all with this. These are hybrid schedules that I'm sharing right now. And then off to the right here, or the far side, is Wednesday activities. You will notice that it says between 1:40 and 2:30 that this is online independent work, special services, IEP 504, support interventions, things of that sort. This is not the only time these students would be served. Rather, this is in addition to if it's needed. For students that are getting a regular period of support, that's still built into this schedule. And then again, this is just some additional time built in on top of that as necessary. This is a sample for the high school, similar to what we're looking at with the middle school. And I know these are really difficult to read in terms of a lot of information all condensed into these screens, but it's the same type of thing for them in terms of odd days and even days for support, and then some additional periods where they could be provided with time on top of that if necessary. And this might be our EL students that are learning English, or students that just need some additional support, tutoring from their, or not tutoring, but engagement from their teachers. As we start to bring students on site, we are looking at our students with the highest amount of special ed services. Some in-person activities are the check-ins, their morning meetings, things of that type that you can see here, versus the remote activities, which could be some discrete trial training with, or training data being taken with the support staff within the classroom, some independent activities they can work on, and other more independent routes. We are currently doing this with 2 days a week, starting with half days so that students can build up their stamina. Having been at home in a non-structured classroom setting for the past 6 months, we really want to start slow so that we can build up the time that students have on site and increase their stamina for learning, as well as their ability to engage in a classroom setting where it's people that they haven't been seeing in the past several months, and it allows for that group interaction to be rebuilt. My screen got stuck. There it goes. So ASD at home versus intent to homeschool. If a family has chosen ASD at home, that is completely supported by the district in terms of, it's a state-aligned curriculum with assessments as needed, district-provided materials, and it's got teacher facilitation from the district, so the district is supporting that activity. Compared to a family that chooses to homeschool with the intent to homeschool and they're doing their own activities, they would still be expected to have some state-aligned curriculum, follow any state assessments, but the district won't be providing the materials for them, and there would not be any ASD staff helping to facilitate. So that takes us to the point where we can start digging into some of these Q&A questions, and I will turn it over to Dr. Clifford to see if she has anything to add real quick, and we will start reading through these questions.
I think we can get started with the questions. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay.
So Shannon, there's a couple of questions about how are students being identified for who are or may have trouble wearing masks, and then will my 3 or 5-year-old have to wear a mask? They sometimes wear them, but I don't make them because they have respiratory issues. And I know that you spoke to this a little bit. I also know that Emily has guidelines. Emily, our nurse Emily, has guidelines from the state, and she's working on finalizing some of those recommendations for supporting that criteria. But you had shared, I think, in our sessions on Friday, some ideas.
Mm-hmm. So we're looking at some fading support and just helping the students be comfortable with the masks. One of the activities some of our teachers are planning is that they are actually going to have white masks that they bring for that first day of school for the students to decorate and create their own masks so that they have some ownership in that, help that encourage just that little piece. With the 3 to 5 year olds, it is going to depend on their comfort level wearing those masks. And again, we've got to follow the Department of Health guidance with that. There's a little bit of a misconception with the frequency or how long students need to be wearing masks. A lot of this has to do with proximity. If they are one of 3 people and they're all 12 feet apart from each other, we're maintaining social distancing. They have the ability to take their masks off when they're outside. They have the ability to take their masks off when they're out running around and engaging in some of those physical activities. The masks are really for close proximity and when we can't maintain that social distancing, that we're asking that they be worn as per the guidelines that we have. And we are working closely with our district nurse who is following district and state guidance around what those health precautions are from Department of Health, as well as OSPI and other entities as we move forward with that.
And if a student has some medical issues that prevent them from wearing masks, again, we'll be working with Nurse Emily to help us support and address a plan for students in those situations. All right. Make sure that I get to so the next one, I'm just going to go right in order. When will some more specifics on synchronous and asynchronous time actually be? The schedule is out and it's vague. It could be either. So yes, there is minimum and maximum times on each of the schedules for synchronous and asynchronous time. So there's a minimum and maximum of synchronous, and then there will be components of those schedules. So at the elementary level, there's kind of blocks throughout the day for instruction. And then there's guidelines for a minimum and maximum synchronous. There will be components of asynchronous, and there will also be some hands-on instructional materials provided. So if you have questions specifically about the synchronous, we can address those. And I don't have them in front of me, but we have those written right on the documents. There's a question about clarifying if class length is 80 minutes per period for high school. They may be 80 minutes or 90-minute blocks. Patrick, I know that you've been working with the secondary and you may have this memorized better than I do. But because we're doing an A-B schedule, and students will have block classes, and they will have 4 classes on one day and then 3 classes on another day. Schedule B with an extra time for support and a small group or check-in. So yes, they are, I believe they are 80 minutes at the high school to support that block. It is not 80 minutes of synchronous the whole time, but it is an 80-minute period. And then there's questions on how was a 3-hour day chosen, and then later on there was a whole team asked about building stamina. So I'm going to hand this over to Shannon first, and then I'm happy to add. She's worked closely with the team, with all of the district staff, and connected with colleagues across the state. So Shannon, why don't you speak to that?
So we've been working on this for the past few weeks in terms of bringing students back. And while I've got many colleagues around the region who are not bringing any students back at all, we really wanted to make sure we started students on site to get them the support they need, because we knew that they had difficulty accessing either, online issues or just trying to connect with their needs individually. So the 3 hours with half days came from talking to the staff and thinking about how we have students over winter break or spring break or during those time periods in the year when they're out of school for a while, and how we take time at the beginning of the year to try and reintroduce a lot of the skills that we had in many cases. So the thinking here is between the different groups that we're working with, which is food services, transportation, and the teachers, to bring all of this together. That 3-hour time frame allows us to bring students back on site, get them comfortable with being back at school, and as we are finding success in that 3 hours, we start increasing our time. And this allows us to continue to increase time and still have time for cleaning and things of that sort, and hopefully move us into a position where we are no longer in the Department of Health guidance of keep groups as small as humanly possible, or not even as small as humanly possible. Just keep these groups as small as possible, because right now we've got limits to how many people we can have in a space at a time and things of that sort. So we're trying to work through all of that. And because of the amount of space that's needed to have students in a classroom, many classes don't have enough room in them to put the staff that you've got as well as students. So that's where the AB cohorts come in, of splitting students up into smaller groups so that we can provide those supports for them as we go in.
Okay, and then there was a question I've got to catch up because, okay. There's a question on if the whole team, I'm assuming the whole IEP team, was asked if building standard was needed, and if it seems like this was decided everybody's behalf when OSPI is specifically stated in their discussion that schools are open for in-person learning in small groups. So this is a model that we are starting with, knowing that we are going to meet with individual families to make individual decisions. Some families may, there are some students that were highly successful in a remote setting and may decide that they don't want to come in person at all, or for health reasons may decide that they don't want to come in person at all. And so we will have a discussion and make a decision collectively together. There are some families that may want to come just for one day instead of 2 days. And so those conversations will be had. Those discussions will be had as a team. It will either be a formal meeting or through a phone call and through the process of what is similar to an IEP amendment, where you can have a conversation and make decisions as a team without holding a full formal meeting. And but each of these families will be contacted by their special ed teacher to talk about the best what as a team with the 2 days, 3 hours each day, talking through with that team what's going to make most sense for each individual child. And then outside of those 2 days, their learning will still continue in a remote setting. Okay, there was a question about transitioning. Can you talk about the transition services offered for special education students for ASD at home? So Shannon, why don't you, I'm not sure if that's about high school services, or if this is an 18 to 21 question, but why don't we answer it from a high school services perspective?
So from a high school services perspective, it's with students in the ASD at home, whether it's high school, middle school, elementary, we are still following our IEPs. We'll have the same meetings that Dr. Clifford was just referring to in terms of talking about how we can address the individual needs for students as we would with them in the hybrid setting. For the students that are in a transition such as ATTIC or INVEST, those two programs are hopefully contacting you because they've got similar plans in place. There's a couple of days that they're looking at to just get things rolling, turn in, issue electronic devices and things like that. And then they're planning a hybrid remote learning for this fall quarter. So if you have not heard from ATTIC or INVEST, please let me know. I will put my contact info in the chat so that you can reach out to me directly. and I can connect you with them.
And I'm just going to add that there are, we have just finalized the enrollment for at the end of the week last week for ASD at home. And we are pulling together the students, students who are identified as having IEPs or 504s so that we can determine, pull those IEPs and 504s and determine what services and supports we're going to connect with ASD at home based on the enrollment and student needs. So more information will come, and will be probably through the principal be in communication with you for those who have selected ASD at home. There's a question about, is there a process identified for 504 IEP meetings for renewals and or a new plan? Yes, we will be holding 504 and IEP meetings for the annual reviews and or if there's an initial IEP. They will more than likely be Zoom meetings, we will be developing IEPs based on a traditional setting, not a hybrid setting. So we will be reviewing those processes with special ed staff and counselors and administrators so that we are all on the same page. And then we will have a special ed and 504 FAQ so that for parents to reference on the district website before the 14th. My son's IEP caseworker has recently moved to another state. How do I find out who is taking over and how to pick up where he was left off? We are currently in the process of hiring. The job is posted, and we are reviewing candidates as we speak. And we are also have been in communication with a potential sub, but we will make sure that if a special ed teacher has left, that services will still be in place and that your children will be supported. My high school student needs foreign language. We need to do ASL for Running Start, but that is not going to happen. Can he access ASL at home curriculum for their ASL class option, even though he's registered as hybrid? The ASD at home is offering, course offerings will be the exact same course offerings that are offered at the hybrid model. Whatever courses are offering at the high school will also be offered at ASD at home. So that's true, the same truth for foreign language. The reason why we are doing that is because there are, because students who are attending the ASD at home, families have requested that they want and students have requested that they want their child to receive, or student to receive a high school, Anacortes high school diploma. We want to make sure that we're meeting the high school requirements, high school graduation, state and local district graduation and pathway requirements. So we're offering the same courses to ensure that students meet their high school graduation requirements. We're also offering the same courses because if a student wants to, after this year, or if there's a request mid-year to move back to hybrid, we want to make sure that there's a seamless transition and the transcript is aligned, again, to ensure that students are meeting their high school requirements and have the right graduation pathways to support graduation. And so I can't speak to Running Start, and so I don't. We can have an individual conversation about ASL. I can't speak to Running Start and what is or isn't happening there.
No, but they can contact their student's counselor and get more information about that. Perfect.
That's a great idea, Shannon. How is school going to make up time with specialists that was not provided last year? That's a great question. We will be providing more information on that. We are meeting with our special ed teams this week and next week. And so we will provide more information about how we're determining what students participated in for services and what they didn't. And then what the recovery services will look like. How is compensatory education going to be provided for lost hours since children cannot be provided FAPE online and will be missing huge blocks of educational time? We are, I think right now we are making a plan, and we will be making a plan with each of you to provide FAPE. Right now, students are, all students, we have learning priorities, learning standard or priority standards that all students are working, all students will be working towards this year. And we are supporting, just as we've been bringing teacher leaders in and been doing work for making sure that we have instruction in a way that is going to be successful for students in a remote environment. Access to those resources and supports are also available for our special education staff members. And we are also providing time and training for the special education staff members to support instruction so that we can continue to see students' progress. What will be happening at high school level for students that need some support but not life skills? IEP was not written for remote learning. So all students right now will be accessing instruction in a remote learning setting. And so teachers will be in communication with families. We'll follow the AB model. There will be synchronous, asynchronous, and hands-on learning. There's also additional times throughout the day for additional support, both whole group, small group, and individual check-ins for students and families. How many students will be in groups? Will unmasked children be separated from children who are wearing masks? I'm going to hand this over to you, Shannon, because you've been working, you've spent more time with all of the teachers than I have in planning, and then I'm happy to add.
So with our student groups, we're looking at groups of about 5 to 6 students that are in the class at a time, with 2 to 3 adults is our starting point. So it keeps us under that grouping of 10 that we are that is being recommended to us. It is also allowing us to work out any kinks in terms of spacing and additional spaces that we might need to utilize throughout the buildings. In terms of looking at unmasked children being in the same space as students who are wearing a mask, it's going to depend on how much space. If I am in a room with a student who is 20 feet away on the other side, the expectation isn't necessarily that we both have to be wearing a mask. It's when we're close working together. So if we're working hand over hand, then we might both be wearing a mask, or I might just have additional personal protective equipment that I'm wearing if I'm working with a student who is having difficulties with wearing a mask. And we've also got some additional items such as plexiglass shields for desks and things like that that we can put into place to help with some of that personal protective gear that we're talking about.
Okay, what about students who are unable to wear masks due to medical issues? Will they be encouraged to wear masks when they shouldn't due to medical issues? No, they won't. And Shannon, I'll let you speak to that.
I was going to say, I think I just covered that one with the last question. So a twofer.
Is there a schedule or plan for elementary school and preschools? When will we find out if our children gets to come back to in-person help? So Shannon, you can speak to the preschool, but developmental preschool will be coming back. So we'll be reaching out to those families. And our hope is that in steps 4, we're able to bring back at least our kindergarten or our youngest learners at the elementary level. So once we move to step 4, that is part of our discussions to bring back some students in step 4. Shannon, do you want to add more about preschool?
Yeah, I was just going to say that with staff coming back on Tuesday, sorry, what day is today? Monday, the 2nd, Wednesday. As staff get back, this is part of the plans that they're putting in place. They've been working to see how they can put all this together, and they're looking at their groupings of students to play with the dynamics of student engagement and student relationships, so that with the social emotional pieces that they want to work on and some of the academics, they don't have like student who's working at an 8th grade level trying to work with a student who's at a 2nd grade level, but they can make those adjustments within their groupings. So you should be hearing from your case managers or your student's case manager by this time next week, if not sooner this week, so that you can get an idea of what days, and transportation will also be contacting as we get all of the details finalized.
All right, it says, what software program is offered for high school ASD at home and electives, eDynamics, etc.? I don't know what eDynamics is. Is a high school curriculum listed online for ASD at home? The course catalog was just finalized midweek last week. I don't know if it's been published, but we certainly can publish that. So I will make sure that that gets published. And for ASD at home, all of the course offerings that align with the district course offerings are through the Edmentum platform. When will we know if our child is included in the in-person classes? So I think at least at the elementary, middle, and high, all parents received an invite or contact to participate in a meeting on Friday. So Shannon, can you speak to that? Has everybody been communicated with? And if not, what's our plan for communicating?
Yeah, question. So I'm looking at which question you're on.
It's when will we know if our child is included in the in-person classes?
So that's part of the communication happening within the next week or so that we are advising parents. It's our self-contained kiddos and our kiddos in developmental pre-K with Miss Billow that we are looking at right now as coming in these small groups. And then step 4 is when we're adding in the additional students. So if you don't hear from someone, or if you have questions about what category your child would fall into, you can feel free to reach out and let me know.
All right, last spring, my child felt totally overwhelmed, often spending 4 to 6 hours a day trying to do his homework, sometimes 7 days a week. Work was often too much at times. I felt like I was bothering teachers asking questions, and how is the curriculum going to be modified in regular classrooms to help, and how will it be explained to students? So we've really streamlined. Teacher leaders have taken the lead on, and department teams have taken some time this summer to pull together the curriculum, make plans for daily lessons, both synchronous and asynchronous. And it's going to be much more, it's going to have a much more fluid, and it's going to look more like class instruction than the last 3 months of the year, where we had different guidance from the state. And it's submitted or it's going to be translated into a digital context. I think that the way that it's been, the teacher leaders have been working really hard to be really intentional and thoughtful about how to engage students in a way that meets a variety of student needs, and have access points for a variety of students into the content and curriculum. And we are all using Schoology, so we're using the same learning management system. And so families will have a similar experience, students and families will have a similar experience from their teachers. So we hope to remove some of the complexities and barriers, and the special ed teachers will be in communication with the gen ed teachers to make sure that they are aware of students' accommodations and modifications, and to collaborate. So we're hoping that we expect that there will be a different experience this year. We've had some time and brought in some different resources to support that. And we also want to work with you to make sure that that is the case. And if your child is struggling, please reach out to your principal and special ed teacher and gen ed teacher, so that the team can work together. What if our student does not have, nor has ever had, the stamina for an 80-minute period? Will that be addressed prior to school, starting with the IEP team? So while there is an 80-minute period, students are not necessarily going to be on for a full 80 minutes. And yes, you absolutely can, your IEP team will certainly be having conversations with you. If children are having to social distance, how will they get the social emotional help that their IEP states they will? Do my voice IEPs need to be rewritten because they won't be getting services with their current IEPs say they'll get? So we will still be delivering social emotional support, social emotional learning, and Shannon can speak to that a little bit more. We're not going to be rewriting the IEPs, but we will be documenting in the prior written notice if there are some adjustments if the team with parent agreement are having some adjustments to what some of those services look like. But we will be still providing social emotional learning. Do you want to speak to that a little bit, Shannon?
Yes, at the pre-K and elementary as well as middle school levels, we'll be using Ruler as we had started to use with students last year. And at the high school, we're using Character Strong, and we have social emotional activities that are built into instruction. That's what our teacher leaders have been working on. So it's not just math and reading and things of that sort, but also social emotional activities through check-ins and various pieces of the curriculum itself being integrated. With that, we've also got our IEP teams, such as our special ed teachers, as well as our counselors that are looking at how they can support students' social and emotional needs as we progress through the year, whether it's in a remote setting or in-person phone calls, emails, whatever we need to do.
So the next question is, how many small groups do you have scheduled in high school? And how can we get the student to be in school for 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday? And how soon will be moving to a full day status? So we, small groups we have to be able to have meet social distance requirements. So that 6 feet, at least 6 feet between each person in the classroom setting. We have to remain in cohorts so that students stay together. And so there are very specific requirements from the government and from the local health authority and from the Department of Health. And so we will be following those guidelines. How can we get students to be in school for 4 days a week? So it's just gonna, so I'm speaking globally. I know that we have a wide range of parents on this call or on this webinar. And I think there are certain things that we have to consider for that. And so I don't have the answers today on that. We know that on our 6 steps, steps 3, 4, and 5 are up to 2 days a week. However, in our conversations and call the Zoom meetings with families on Friday, there was an interest in more than that. And so it's certainly something that we will be exploring in our planning so that we can see if we can make sure that we are able to do that feasibly and successfully while also honoring the different steps when we bring more students into the classroom, and hopefully when we get to or into school, hopefully when we get to step 5, where all students can return up to 2 days a week, and we're in an AB model, and we're working through the full process of screenings and following social distance guidelines. So I don't have an answer today as far as when students will come 4 days a week and when they will be participating full time, especially for those students that are going to start in person September 14th. But those are things that we heard and we will be considering and that will be built into our planning. Okay, the next question is, there are not that many children in the enclosed classrooms. If there are 10, we are already doing AB teams where 5 come in 2 days and the other 5 come in 2 days, why must 3-hour limits be in place? I understand that people are not happy with the 3-hour limits. That is what we are starting with a plan for moving to full day. If it is something that is very successful and students are ready to hop back into school, we will move up to a full day pretty quickly. So we're not opposed to that. We just wanted to make sure that we set everybody up for success. How is data going to be collected? There are a variety of ways for data collection, both using our learning management information system. So that is part of our training next week, this week and next week. And so Shannon, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
We are using the online elements. We are also looking at some data being done when staff are working, like a para might be working with a student in a small group of students. So we've got several different data pieces that we're looking at, including what we would normally do in a standard classroom setting, whether we have students that are hybrid or at home or whichever.
Okay. The Superintendent of Public Instruction at a Parent Live Facebook event with the Arc of Washington explained with no less than 5 times 3 minutes that our schools are open for small school setting. He explained that students with the most needs should be brought back full time, that data in the spring showed should be reviewed with the amount of students and life skills. In our district, the number would be very small. Each school building would not be able to accommodate life skills in that building for the full-time instruction. So yes, Shannon and I both participated in that meeting, and we did hear. They also spoke to that there are specific guidelines and processes that school districts are following to make sure that we're making good decisions to ensure the health and safety of each student. We as a district made a decision to go remote and change up the model about 3 weeks ago. And so we had to change our planning. So what in-person looks like, this is how we are starting right now. And we are, as I mentioned before, going to explore expanding the amount of time that students are attending in person. We will be having conversations with individual families. How are social, emotional, and behavioral needs going to be met? Is the district contracting again this year with Blue Water and UW for BCBA support? So Shannon already spoke to, we have curriculum within the district to promote and support social, emotional, and behavioral learning and skills and development. If an IEP has contracted services and or those are something that we need to access to support instruction and support students' growth in the area of social, emotional, and behavioral, then we will certainly explore that and make sure that we're supporting students in their needs. Shannon, is there anything else you want to add to that?
I'm just thinking Blue Water and UW are, in some cases, we actually got paras or other staff that come in and support students. So if that's part of a student's IEP or part of their supports, that would continue while they are on site. It's a little bit trickier for the at-home if there's a student at home that has a one-to-one in terms of how that's provided. And we are working with, not Blue Water, but the BMAC staff and these entities to work out the details of how we can continue to provide supports for students as we need to based on their IEPs.
Yep. And in my past experience and in a number of districts and in over conversations over the summer, a number of students, whether it's district or agency, there have been very strategic and intentional supports via in a remote setting via Zoom or phone calls to support students in planning out their day, talking through and planning through how to build those skills and then practice those skills throughout the day. Those services will be available in person, and then we will also have access to supports in a remote environment. Okay, that didn't answer the question of FAPE. If a child can't learn remotely, then cannot receive FAPE. How are those hours being made up? I will be looking at it on an individual basis. We are looking at each student to make sure that we see how students are doing and what their needs are, and then we will be making decisions on how we will be providing that as a district. Will the children be allowed to play outside on play equipment during the 3 hours they are in person? Shannon, do you want to speak to that?
That is going to depend on guidance from OSPI and the health department. There's been some conflicting information there. And I don't want to say, yes, this is the great way that it's going to work and have something completely different fall into place. Daycare settings and things like that have been given a bit of an okay to do that. And we just want to make sure that we're following in with the guidelines for school-age children because it's slightly different. But I will double back on that one with Nurse Emily, as well as Mr. Harrington, if you have heard anything about that one.
I have not.
Apparently there aren't enough playgrounds at the middle school. I'll double back on that one.
Yep. Are you having trouble with insurance? I've heard that schools are struggling with insurance, not allowing it in person because of time of this constraint. Our schools, insurance, and risk pools that support schools have been very explicit that we need to follow the exact guidelines, and we need to make sure that everything is in place to the T, following the exact health and safety guidelines from the Department of Health, the local health authority, and OSPI and state requirements. So we are trying to make sure that we are being very intentional about our planning and make sure that we do it right and do it well so that we are successful and we support students in their success. How is the remote learning going to work for kindergarten? Will it be 6 hours a day in front of a computer? No, it will not be 6 hours a day in front of a computer. It's a great question. We had a kindergarten, you may have participated in it, I think, a kindergarten family meeting last week or 2 weeks ago. I think that how the schedule is structured at the elementary level, that most of the core instruction will be happening in the morning, and it will not be all on the computer. There will be a combination of some synchronous or video like this, or where students can engage. Some that will be asynchronous, where they might be watching a video and then doing practice at their home, and we are providing some of those resources to families to support that. And we'll also be providing hands-on instructional materials. So we're just going to be really intentional about supporting the kindergarten, that first experience at school. Not ideal and not what we were hoping for, but we're going to do our best to support kindergartners and really focus on spending a good chunk of the morning focusing on instruction, but it will not be all in front of a computer. Thank you for letting me know that we had some disconnects with the communication for the Friday's meeting. We did hear that some people didn't receive the communication, and we will make sure that we double check our lists going forward. So thank you for sharing that. And we also wonder if it want to make sure that it didn't get into folks' junk mail. And also it was, we'll also send it from a known an email address in the future. IEPs in place day one of school. Will related service and supports be provided? Telehealth when possible. With high needs students, will there be IEP meetings before school starts to discuss needs of services and supports, and how will they be provided and amended? The IEP is necessary. So related services will be provided, and it's going to depend. We will be meeting with related service teams this week to talk about the in-person model as well as just globally. Their supports across the board. They will be providing remote services and potentially providing in-person if it makes sense. And just we have to have conversations with them to talk about that. We need to make sure that they themselves are not in an at-risk category and can be able to be in person before we can determine if they're able to provide in-person services. I don't know if right now, teams will not be prepared to have IEP meetings prior to September 14th. They may be able to have a couple, but I don't think that we will be able to have meetings with every single family, full IEP meetings. We won't be amending the IEP. We will be writing prior written notices that document decisions based on what services and supports are discussed for a hybrid service and supports in a hybrid model. Will students with special education services be offered additional instructional support for ASD at home remotely for self-directed materials, also emotional remote support? Thank you so much for all of your support and help. I mentioned at the beginning that we're looking at the number of students that have registered or selected that learning option, and then we'll be looking at their IEPs to determine how we can deliver those services and supports. So if students have areas of eligibility, such as social, emotional, or behavior, then they will be able to access that service. And more information to come for students and families that have students with special education services and have selected the ASD at home model. We are at 7:30 and we have 9 questions left. So what I'm going to have to do is I want to thank you all so much for participating and for asking your questions, sharing your ideas, thoughts, questions, and concerns. We will be reviewing the rest of these questions, and then we will make sure to follow up with an update on if these are not, if these questions are different than what was asked or answered above. So I thank you so much. Shannon, is there anything else you want to add tonight before we close?
No, I just really appreciate everybody taking the time to meet with us tonight. And again, feel free to reach out to me directly if you are having any questions or concerns or you're unable to reach your student's case manager.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say is that we want to make sure that we have ongoing communication with our families. And so this is a first step in establishing an opportunity to meet and communicate. And we will create other opportunities throughout the year. So thank you so much for participating today. And hopefully sometime in the near future, we will be able to hold meetings in person. Thank you so much and have a great night.